All right, you guys asked for it, so I'm going to give it to you. It's my gluten-free pizza dough recipe. About 5 months ago, I changed the way that I eat, and pizza was one of those things that I had a really hard time giving up. But I've been working on mastering my gluten-free dough recipe. I would say about 6 months ago, if somebody told me that I was going to be eating gluten-free and dairy-free pizza, I would have laughed. There's a lot of people out there that eat this way, and for one reason or another, that trend is growing. And so I just want to help pass along some of my recipes and let you all know that you don't have to give up things that you really love. You can find new ways to eat pizza and pasta and things like that that you enjoyed before you started eating this way. So I'm going to start with that today, and then we'll see if you guys like it. I'll keep doing some more recipes. This is a pretty simple recipe. Aside from the flour, yeast, and water, really the only other things that you're going to need is a little bit of olive oil, some baking soda, and a little bit of salt. And that will basically be all you need for your gluten-free dough. The most important piece of your gluten-free dough is the flour you use. And I have been using Caputo gluten-free flour, like a type 00 or 00 flour for my Neapolitan style gluten-free pizzas. This is literally the most important part of you making a really good gluten-free pizza dough. I know there's a perception out there that a lot of the gluten-free pizza doughs are really flat. You can't get a lot of fluff out of them. I would say the opposite is true for this dough. So this is where you want to start. Make sure you get good gluten-free flour, and that'll be the staple part of creating a good dough. So before I get started mixing any of the dry ingredients, I always start with yeast and a little bit of water. A lot of people ask me what kind of yeast I'm using. You can use all sorts of kinds. Typically I stick with the Fleischmann's active dry yeast. So I will take the 1 cup of water. It's warm water, warm to the touch, not too hot, not too cold. And I get the yeast in there and I whisk it. Basically what this does is lets you activate the yeast ahead of time. Maybe give it a whisk for 15, 20 seconds or so. And then I set it aside for about 10 minutes before I start mixing all the dry ingredients together. So we let our yeast and water sit for about 7 to 10 minutes. You'll know it's ready when you start seeing some foam bubbling up on top of the surface of the water. So right now we're starting with the 2.5 cups of the Caputo gluten-free flour. Then we are adding a half teaspoon of baking soda. And then lastly, in the dry ingredients, we are going to add about a teaspoon of salt. Before we add all of the dry ingredients to the mixer, I typically will set my 2.5 cups of flour inside of a mixing bowl aside, and then I will add a half a teaspoon or so of baking soda. Toss that in there. You can measure out your salt. It's usually about a teaspoon or a teaspoon and a half of salt. I usually take a little bit of my sea salt and we'll just kind of eyeball it. If you're not comfortable with that, you can just grab a teaspoon and measure it out perfectly. I'm going to go ahead and add all the dry ingredients in my bowl here to the mixer. And we'll get the dough ball attachment on. And then before we start adding the water, yeast, and olive oil, I'm going to give that a good little mix. Let those things mix up together first. Alright, we've got our mixer going. I've got my water and yeast. I'm going to slowly add this to the dry mixture. The dough does really feel quite a bit different than using regular flour. It almost turns into a Play-Doh type feeling. I know the first time I made this, I almost didn't even use it because it kind of grossed me out. The more you experiment with your recipe and tweak things, you will find kind of different tips and tricks to making it work for you. Alright, so once the dough starts to take shape, you'll still see it kind of flaky and dusty. Then go and add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Not something I usually add to my regular dough recipes where I'm using normal flour, but this really helps with the gluten-free dough and how it turns out. So you may have to get in there after it turns for a little bit and just kind of scrape the sides down, make sure you're getting all of the ingredients, dry ingredients off the side of the bowl. Then I put the mixture back down and give it a spin for another, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes. Make sure to keep it on low speed. The faster you do it, the more dust and flour shooting everywhere. So low speed is probably the best way to go. If you're looking down at your dough and it looks a little bit too wet, don't be afraid to add a little dusting of extra flour. Just slowly add a little bit at a time, and that will help it kind of form back into a ball. A lot of this is not science, but mainly just eyeballing, and you'll get the hang of it once you get your first good dough ball and remember what the texture was like. And we're almost ready to pull this out and show you guys. So I'm all done with the mixer. What we got now is a dough ball. Still needs some kneading. So after about, I don't know, mixing for 8 minutes in the mixer, getting a nice ball, I will then take it out and do some hand kneading. We'll just like gently kind of fold itself in, fold the dough in on itself, and just keep kind of pressing, start forming that all together. I think the first thing I was really surprised about with the gluten-free dough is that it actually rises. I know there's some stuff out there about gluten-free dough not rising really well because there's no gluten in it to react with the yeast, but this recipe really does help make it rise. So we have a nice round dough ball, and what we're going to do now is set it inside of a bowl, put a warm cloth over top of it, and let it sit at room temperature. I'm going to let it sit for 2.5 hours or so, and then I'm going to put it in the refrigerator to do a cold proof at, I don't know, let's say probably 8 to 12 hours. So that's what we're going to do, and when it's ready, we'll pull it out and show you guys how to shape it into pizza dough. Alright, so the dough has sat for about, let's say, 24 hours. About 17 or 18 of those hours have been in the refrigerator. I have split the dough into 2 equal ball sizes, and all you need for this next part, it's a little different than traditional dough or Neapolitan style dough. What you're going to need to get this dough kind of shaped out into the size and shape of a pizza is a big piece of tin foil and a nice piece of saran wrap. So that's what we're gonna kick off with, and I'll show you guys how to shape the dough. First step in shaping the dough, we're gonna take a little bit of olive oil on your tin foil here and just do a gentle little coating on the tin foil. Spread it around a little bit, just so that the dough doesn't stick. Traditionally, in a standard pizza oven, you just throw the normal dough right onto the pizza stone, but with the gluten-free dough, it will stick a lot easier. So we're gonna actually launch it into the pizza oven right on the tin foil itself. So I've got my dough ball, set that down. I'm gonna cover the top of it with a little bit of olive oil here. And then you're gonna take your saran wrap, and you're gonna go right over top of the dough and just start pressing out your gluten-free dough into a circle. Try to work from the middle out. That way you can kind of keep a thicker crust than the regular, or the body of the pizza. You usually get a nice 10 to 12 inch dough out of one of the dough balls. So we'll just keep working that out, pushing towards the edges, and you can see it starts to take shape. And there you have it. A nice round gluten-free pizza dough. I'm just going to leave the saran wrap over top until you're ready to top it with your toppings. We're going to be doing a dairy-free because we also don't eat cheese anymore, which is pretty disappointing. But we're going to show you how to make a really good gluten-free pizza without dairy. You can get, dairy-free cheese. I'm still trying to find something that actually melts and doesn't taste disgusting after it melts at 600-700 degrees in the pizza oven. But I'm going to show you some tricks to that on probably another episode. We're going to top the pizza with our toppings. We have salami, mushrooms, banana peppers, roasted red peppers, and that's going to go on top of a dairy-free pesto. Here we go. We've got the new Uni Karu. I put my gas burner on, and so that's been heating up. The stone is around 650 degrees. As I said, we normally will just throw the the dough right on the pizza stone, but with the gluten-free, we leave it on the tin foil. So I'm gonna get that launched in there. Normally the pizza takes anywhere from 60 to 90 seconds. I think the gluten-free is usually a little bit longer than that. Rotate it in about, I don't know, maybe 15 seconds or so. I just rotated it. You can see it starting to brown up. All right, we are taking it out. Not bad for gluten-free. Crust gets nice and brown, even fluffs up a little bit. All right, last thing we're gonna do is take this cashew cheese. It's called tree line cheese. It's very similar to like a goat cheese texture. And we're just gonna put a couple dollops of this on top of the pizza, and that will be the final touch. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something, and if you have any questions as you guys try and go through and do the dough recipe yourselves, feel free to shoot me a message, and I'll be happy to walk you through it. I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.